So what I've done is opened an example GIS file for the purposes of just studying the interface and what different things are. So right now I have two types of terrain data in here. I have one that is LiDAR data, and I just want to zoom in really close so that we can study this LiDAR data. And we can see the closer that we get, we begin to see the grid that defines this surface. Each grid has a color, and the color represents an elevation. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. And this happens to be 2-meter resolution LiDAR, so it can see the houses and some of the streets, and definitely the creek that runs through here. This happens to be Elbow Creek. Now I'm going to turn on the 10-meter resolution so that we can just kind of compare a little bit, and we can see we don't have as fine resolution. Let me go and change it to the same color as the other one that we had. And I need to invert. And we also have some sort of transparency thing going on here. So if you notice, I right-clicked on the layer and went to Properties, and you can change the symbology, which is the color scale and how things are divvied up. And the transparency, you can make things kind of see-through. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the 2-meter. So you can see that's the 2-meter LiDAR, very high resolution. And then that's our 10-meter. And if you notice, the grid cells are much larger. So I'm going to zoom into an edge here so we can actually see this. So this is what it means when we talk about resolution. So this cell here is 10 meters by 10 meters, while the LiDAR data is 2 meters by 2 meters. So you can now begin to see what the definition of resolution is. So the higher the resolution, obviously the better surface representation that you're going to have. So back over here to the left side to our table of contents. We have several layers here, and basically how this works is that each of these, you can kind of imagine it to be like a layer of trace. So if you're on a drafting table and you have maybe 10 layers of trace paper on top of each other, and the very bottom one happens to be my topography, my 10-meter terrain. The trace paper on top of that is my 2-meter. The trace paper on top of that is maybe aerial photography. The trace paper on top of that is zoning. The trace paper on top of that is land use, land coverage, etc. So if you have, like for example, this 2-meter LiDAR on top, and since I don't have a transparency setting set, I obviously can't see through it to see the thing that's underneath it. But if I turn it off by unchecking it, I can see the terrain underneath. So that's important to kind of remember. A lot of people tend to put things underneath the thing that's turned on. They're saying, well, I keep adding it, but I don't see it in there. It's because it's underneath another sheet. So if you want it to be on top, all you have to do is click on it and then drag it up to the top. And then ArcGIS will draw it on top. So what we're looking at right now, this is raster type data. This is a raster surface. And like I said, it's defined by grid cells. I'm going to zoom in really close to that corner again, because I want to kind of see what's in the grid cells. Zoom into one that has a little bit of color differentiation. So if I go to identify, what is this cell here? And it's actually, when you use the identify tool, when you click on the thing that's on top. See if it picks that up. It says this is elevation 319. So this is obviously in meters. And then let's take a look at what this one is over here. And it says it's 318, so it's much more refined detail. And the one next to that one is 317. The second type of data that you can add into your data frame is something called a feature class. And a feature class is basically vector data, and it represents points, lines, and polygons. So I'm going to find some vector data. Soils usually comes in vector data. It's usually a polygon. I turn off my topography and turn on my soils. Zoom out a little bit. And we can begin to see the different soil types here. So this is basically a polygon that we're seeing here, several polygons. And each polygon defines a different surface area. Another one is polylines, or lines basically. So I'm going to go over here and turn on hydrology. And all of these lines here, these are lines. This is vector type data. I'm going to go back to soils for just a minute and kind of show you what's special about vector type data. If I right click on soils and select open attribute table, each of these polygon areas has data attached to it. So we have the name, we have special properties, and each of these abbreviations means something. We have its limitation based on this parameter, clay content, climate, concrete, suitability for concrete, corrosion to steel, depth to restricted layer, which is usually bedrock or water table. So we have a lot of detail here attached. I mean, on the screen we just see that it's just a polygon, but in the background there's all of this data that is attached to these soils.